Hello, I am Red Mage, and welcome to a Magic the Gathering video featuring the color red. In today's video, we're doing something a little different. We're going to go over new decks featuring new red cards from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. And then we'll get to some current standard gameplay at the end. Starting off with dinosaurs. This is Ixalan after all, and this is the tribe that seems to be pushed most. We have mana creatures specifically for dinosaurs in the form of Ixali's Lorekeeper and Intrepid Paleontologist. For dinosaurs, we have Belligerent Yearling, which is just the best aggro card in the deck, a 2-mana 3/2 with trample that gets bigger when other dinosaurs enter the battlefield. Pugnacious Hammerskull, a 3-mana 6/6 for some reason. When it attacks, it gets a stun counter if you don't control another dinosaur, but we basically always will because that's what this deck is filled with. This is what you want to be playing on turn 2 off of a turn 1 Ixali's Lorekeeper. We also have Hulking Raptor, a 4-mana 5/3 with Ward 2 that gives you 2 green mana at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, as well as Bonehorde Dracosaur, a 5-mana 5/5 with flying and first strike that exiles cards at the beginning of your upkeep that you can cast. Also gives you 3/1 dinosaurs and treasures. Hulking Raptor and Bonehead Dracosaur are two cards that I really wanted to play together. Hulking Raptor gives you the mana to cast the cards that you exile with Dracosaur. We're also playing 2 Trumpeting Carnosaur, a 6-mana 7/6 with trample that discovers 5 when it enters the battlefield. Discover a new mechanic that has you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a card with mana value X or less, in this case 5, and you can either cast that card or put it into your hand. You can also pay 3 mana and discard the Carnosaur to deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. For other removal, we have Triumphant Chomp. It deals 2 damage to a creature or damage equal to the greatest power among dinosaurs you control. As well as Itzkinth, Firstborn of Gishath, a 2-mana 2/3 with haste. When it enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 mana. When you do, target dinosaur you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. So there are a lot of good lines with this deck. You definitely want turn 1 Ixali's Lorekeeper into turn 2 Pugnacious Hammerskull as often as you can get it. But turn 2 Intrepid Paleontologist into turn 3 Hulking Raptor into turn 4 Trumpeting Carnosaur plus a Triumphant Chomp if you've got it is a great line as well. Or if you don't have any ramp, Belligerent Yearling on turn 2, Pugnacious Hammerskull on turn 3, Hulking Raptor on turn 4 gets you then Trumpeting Carnosaur on turn 5 or Bonehorde Dracosaur plus a removal spell, maybe 2 Belligerent Yearlings. On turn 4, if you played a Pugnacious Hammerskull on turn 3, you can use Itzkinth to kill a creature, or you can do that on turn 3 if you had a turn 1 Ixali's Lorekeeper into turn 2 Pugnacious Hammerskull. So hopefully this build of the deck will allow you to either run over your opponent fairly quickly or have enough value to kind of get across the finish line. One creature we didn't mention yet, Tranquil Frillback. This is kind of just your sideboard card for best of 1. All of these decks we're looking at are going to be for best of 1. This can destroy an artifact or enchantment, exile a graveyard, or gain 4 life. There are a lot of decks against which those effects are going to be useful. Let's go on to the next one. Also to note on this deck, we've got 4 Restless Ridgeline and 4 Cavern of Souls. Next we have a Rakdos Goblin Sacrifice deck. Goblins already had a little bit of a sacrifice sub-theme thanks to Redcap Gutter Dweller and Runvelt Horde Master. And we're kind of just leaning into that further. We've got a new 1-mana Goblin and Stalactite Stalker. It's a 1/1 with Menace. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Stalactite Stalker, or pay 3 mana, sacrifice Stalactite Stalker, target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is Stalactite Stalker's power. We're playing 1 copy of the new legendary goblin, Zoyoa Lava Tongue. I'm not sure if this is going to turn out to be a good card or not. I could see it being good, but I could see it being very mopey as well. 2 mana 2/2 with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, each opponent may discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. It deals 3 damage to each opponent who didn't. Now, that 3 damage can add up. These quote-unquote punisher effects that allow your opponent to choose whichever punishment they're going to receive often don't turn out very well. Ob Nixilis is a great exception to that, but that's an extremely powerful card. So we'll see what happens with this, playing just 1 copy for now. Molten Collapse, new amazing removal spell. 2 mana sorcery, destroy target creature or planeswalker. I will take that all day long, even without the second mode. But that is something that we'll get to take advantage of with this deck, since we will be triggering Descend a lot. So, ways to sacrifice the goblins. We've got 4 Corrupted Conviction, just 1 mana instant, sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. We've got 1 Tarrian's Journal, 2 mana legendary artifact that you can tap and sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw a card, activate only as a sorcery. We can also pay 2 mana and discard our hand to transform it, allowing us to cast creature spells from the graveyard. I don't expect that to happen too often. We're mostly just using it to churn through our deck. Now keep in mind, as we do this, if we have a Runvelt Hordemaster out, we'll be getting additional card advantage from that as well. And we've got Redcap Gutter Dweller, which is really the best sacrifice outlet in the deck. So as we do that, as we draw cards, play creatures, sacrifice creatures, draw more cards, and churn through our deck, if we've got an Exuberant Fuseling or a Stalactite Stalker or a Redcap Gutter Dweller, those creatures are going to be continuously growing. And that allows us to kind of set up a combo finish with Callous Sellsword. We can go through the normal course of the game, attacking, blocking, killing their creatures, dealing damage in combat, and then hopefully as the end game is approaching, they're at 12 or 10 or 8 life, and we're growing our Stalactite Stalkers and Exuberant Fuselings, and then we can just sacrifice them with the Callous Sellsword to finish them off. We've got Cavern of Souls in this deck as well, in addition to 2 of the creature land Restless Vents. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, next we have Burn. And we're looking at these on MTG Goldfish, I should say. Can't look at them on Arena yet because the cards are not on Arena yet. So, as far as red cards go from Ixalan, the key card is Ojer Axonil, Deepest Might. 4 mana 4/4, legendary creature god. Trample. If a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Ojer Axonil's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to Ojer Axonil's power instead. When Ojer Axonil dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. The backside is a land. We sometimes will be able to flip it back over, but we're not too worried about that. This is essentially mechanized warfare on steroids, but it only applies to non-combat damage. So this is going to take the pings from our Kessig Flamebreather and our Thermal Alchemist and then turn them into 4 damage instead of 1. That's primarily what we're looking to do here. Ojer Axonil is the only new card in this deck, but it fits in perfectly with the game plan that already existed. And we have another Ojer Axonil deck in Rakdos Anvil. Oni-Cult Anvil is a red source of non-combat damage, and so it works perfectly with Ojer Axonil's ability. Voldaren Epicure and the Devil tokens from Ob Nixilis also get to take advantage of Ojer Axonil, although it's primarily here to make our Anvil damage 4 instead of 1. Additional new cards, we've got 4 Molten Collapse because it is incredible. Although note that this deck will not trigger Descend as often as you might think. Sacrificing a blood token or a construct, any token does not trigger Descend because a permanent card has to actually go to the graveyard. Still an incredible removal spell regardless of that. 2 Tarrian's Journal, which is a very powerful card, allowing us to draw cards every turn, doing exactly what we would be doing anyway. Sacrificing artifacts. We've got 1 Mephitic Draught, This is an incredibly powerful card, but there are so many great cards for Anvil, we can't play 4 of all of them, and it does cause us to lose life, which is a little sketchy against aggro. And we've got one Fanatical Offering. Again, a great card that I would love to play 4 of, but you can only fit so many cards in the deck. I'm only playing one Restless Vents in this list because you really want to curve out, and I'm afraid that playing too many copies will prevent us from having untapped mana on a crucial turn. We're also playing 2 Mirrex as utility lands, so we've got some value in the mana base elsewhere. So those are the new decks that I wanted to show you. Keep in mind, these are just preliminary lists. As always, when you start playing a deck, you're going to be fine-tuning. Maybe a card doesn't work the way you thought it would. Maybe you have to scrap the idea entirely. So the final lists of Anvil or Burn might end up being different. It's possible the sacrifice version of Goblins won't be a viable strategy. And if you want to play Goblins, you will play more of a traditional one with Picnic Ruiner and Pump Spells. But these are the lists that I'm going to start with to try and figure out if these decks are competitive and how we need to tune them to make them win as much as possible. But we have one more deck that we need to look at. It doesn't have any new cards on it, so we'll look at it on Arena. This is the deck that I've been playing in Best of One Standard over the past week, Gruul Pump Spells. You've likely seen different versions of this floating around. This is my take on it. I've gone a combined 42 and 24 between the ladder and events. That's a 63.6% win rate. I'm really impressed with how successful this deck is, and honestly, really surprised too. We've got Picnic Ruiner and Cacophony Scamp as the pump spell duo. We've got Questing Druid for card advantage and a creature that can get big over time, or pretty quickly, as sometimes is the case. We've got Kumano faces Kakkazan, Monastery Swiftspear, and Phoenix Chick. These are the best aggro creatures in Standard, and Swiftspear, of course, is very synergistic with pump spells because it has prowess. For our pump spells, we've got, of course, 4 Monstrous Rage, 4 Ancestral Anger, something that gives us trample, and it can draw a card so that we can churn through our deck and get to the stuff that we need to get across the finish line. And we've got 4 Audacity. 1 mana green aura that gives +2/+0 and trample. That wouldn't be enough on its own, but when it goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card, so it does replace itself if your creature gets killed in combat. And we've got 2 Tyvar's Stand. Most importantly, this is here for hexproof and indestructible to make sure that our creatures, once we make them really big, don't just get killed. But because it's an X spell, this is essentially a fireball in the late game, or a double fireball if we've got a Picnic Ruiner with double strike. Finally, Callous Sellsword. This allows us to sacrifice our large creature after it has dealt non-lethal combat damage to get across the finish line. This deck has been a lot of fun. Let's give it a try and see what it does. Alright, well, tap lands are unfortunate, but we'll see if we can get through it. Well, we've got a lot of good cards. It's hard to say whether it's best to just play a raw druid or not. I would have preferred to play the Audacity on it. It's just too big of a risk if they have a removal spell. Alright, well, they're tapping out here. So we can do a lot. Let's see. I think we need to save the other druid in case they have a wrath next turn. So let's just see what we get with the ancestral. Okay. So I think we hold back on the Monstrous Rage so we can hold up Tyvar's stand. There's a good chance it's not going to matter if they have a Sunfall or a Farewell. But we'll still have the flipped Kumano next turn if it's Sunfall. Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty good. We prevent them from gaining life. And we keep it around. So the Stomper can't block. Yeah, this is way lethal. So they scooped there before we had the chance to actually kill them. But we could have done it one of two ways. Obviously, the cool way is you sacrifice with the Sellsword. Well, we could just Seek the Beast at instant speed to put another counter and make it 11 power. So you got to see the power of the deck there. We didn't have Picnic Ruiner or Cacophony Scamp, and we were still able to run over ramp. This is a deck that I can definitely recommend playing both before and after Lost Caverns of Ixalan is released. And this deck is so proactive that I think it's something that you can play and take advantage of the early metagame after Ixalan comes out when people are trying new things and stumbling around a lot. The deck lists of all 5 decks we talked about today are in the description. One thing that we didn't talk about is Mono Red Aggro. I don't think you really need to make any changes to Mono Red Aggro for it to be good. That's another deck I would definitely recommend both before and after Ixalan comes out. Check out my last Mono Red video if you want that deck list. Let me know in the comments what cards and decks you're most excited to try out after Ixalan is released, and I'll see you in the next one.